Good evening, everyone. Every day at Curious Works, we get to spend time with the most extraordinary people, and our job is to give them a voice. Our programs build the capacity of disadvantaged communities to tell their own stories in their own ways, powerfully and sustainably. Through theatre, film, and various forms of innovative digital art, our company enables stories and empowers storytellers. So in the spirit of that philosophy, before hearing more from me, I want to introduce you first to some of our storytellers from Western Sydney and let them share with you a little bit of their story.
My name is Lazar. Media portrays my community and my way of life sort of based on stereotypes a lot.
And upsets me because that's how we're perceived.
It's important for us to represent our communities our ways.
Because mainly in the TV now you see, oh, Middle Eastern, there is a crime, or Asian. The main thing is to maybe give them something good.
And us being from this area, I think we've got a great chance to tell the rest of Australia,
look, we are not bad people.
It's nice for people to explore other communities.
We can understand each other, we live better life, you know?
I think a camera is like a window through imagination.
It's a part of who we are.
One of those people, Guido Gonzalez, has a story that I'm going to expand upon shortly. But first, why voicelessness? At the turn of the millennium, the World Bank interviewed 40,000 people who lived on less than $1 a day and asked them, what's the biggest barrier you face to break down your own disadvantage? Their response, equal to access to food and water, was having a voice. Without a powerful voice that they set the agenda for, they couldn't break down their own disadvantage. Tony Vincent's seminal report, Dropping Off the Edge, has showcased how, despite widespread affluence, Australia still has pockets of communities locked into intergenerational disadvantage. And our research has shown that these are also the most voiceless communities in our country, which means they are rarely mentioned in our national discourse, and if they are, it's usually negative, and usually involves people outside that community. In other words, these communities have no way to speak powerfully and positively for themselves. That's where Curious Works steps in, and that's the balance we seek to readdress. Our stories have reached major national and international arts and film festivals, and significant audiences online. We're currently making our first feature film, which is premiering at Carriageworks in October. Our next theatre work is a development with Belbar, a Melbourne theatre company. Our next large-scale projection work is set to launch on large public screens around the world, including the screens in New York's Times Square. We're serious about placing this country's invisible stories at the centre of our national discourse and showcasing them to the world. We've found that in giving communities a voice, we've also had a major positive impact on health, education, skills and employment levels of the communities we work in. Our work has been evaluated to show increases in long-term levels of social inclusion and of course enables dramatic individual transformation. But what I'm most proud of is that at every stage of our process we pass on our knowledge to the people we work with, ensuring our success is legitimately sustainable. And that's where I'd like to return to the story of Guido, who's now one of our employees. Guido came to Australia as a refugee from Chile. He was in Villawood Detention Centre as a little boy and grew up in Cabramatta in Western Sydney in the 1990s. At school he told his teacher he wanted to become a filmmaker. His teacher said, perhaps you should lower expectations. Think about a job closer to what your community does, like cleaning toilets. Guido entered our community program in 2010. He had plenty of attitude and also a lot of heart. He started making films about his family's experience and about the uniqueness of Western Sydney. His first short film, Villawood Mums, is not only one of our most popular videos online, but was also presented to members of the federal government and the Refugee Review Tribunal. Guido now works with us. He's a co-writer and director with me on that first feature film I mentioned, based on a story from his past. He's worked on many client jobs with us, and the most memorable of these has got to be when he went back to that school to teach filmmaking workshops. And the surprise and hope he engendered amongst the principal and the teachers and students there was an incredible thing for us to enable. The beautiful thing now is that Guido is taking over my job, and he's training up the next generation of storytellers in our Western Sydney arm. He's assembled a group that have called themselves the Curious Creators. These are young people from Aboriginal, refugee and working class communities in Western Sydney. Young people who want nothing more than to share their community stories. Stories of what I think of as real hope, of how the path to crime, drugs, depression can be overcome, and how instead they find a way to mature, support their families in the face of their disadvantage, and how they're able to forge an identity that both honours their ancestors, but also belongs to the present, that of modern Australia. So today we're asking for your support to fund stage 1 of that program with the Curious Creators and support Guido. With $10,000 we can take 20 participants through 8 workshops that teach filmmaking, digital technology and storytelling skills. At the end of this period, they have built the first draft of their script, as well as a short documentary film they can celebrate and share with friends and family in Western Sydney. With $20,000, we can take 40 participants, or double that amount, through the same process. With $30,000, we can also build an online portal to share these stories and those of our past projects from across Australia in a major partnership with the Guardian Australia Online. And that's something I'd love to tell you more about in the Q&A if you're interested. In closing, I'd like to come back to where I started, to remember why Curious Works does all this. Every person's story has immense value, but what we don't often acknowledge is that our invisible stories are where people are most exploited, disadvantaged, hurt, vulnerable, and powerless. As the late great Maya Angelou once said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story. Curious Works is able to transform what could be a burden into a powerful, positive force. Thank you.